You know, living on a private canal in Florida always sounded better than it actually was. People hear that and think, wow, must be paradise. And yeah, sure, on paper, gated community, water access, a couple of jet skis, and my dad's prized Mariner Express parked like a trophy at the dock. It sounds like a dream setup. But when you're actually living there, especially once you're alone enough times, that picture-perfect backdrop starts to feel different. Not bad, just vulnerable, like too quiet, too tucked away. Our house sits at the very end of Harbor Bend, one of those sleepy canals that snakes past a bunch of other expensive homes before dead-ending into a marsh. Nobody really comes that far down unless they have a reason, which used to make it feel private, safe, and I guess it was, until it wasn't. Our parents are barely around. Business, trips, whatever. Most weeks it's just me, Lena, and our dog, Ranger. It's kind of like we're renting someone else's life, pretending we're adults in a house we didn't earn. We had our freedom, sure. We'd throw small get-togethers, take the jet skis out whenever. No one to tell us no. But I think back now and realize we never really thought about how isolated that spot was. No neighbors on one side because of the marsh. No cameras out back. Why would there be? I mean, who breaks into a house by boat, right? It's funny how you only start noticing the cracks after something slips through them. And I guess that's where it really begins. Not with the creepy guy, or the boat, or the note. Just with a place. A beautiful, peaceful place that somehow made it way too easy for the wrong kind of person to slip by unnoticed. It was one of those Florida days where the sun hits different, like the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick and everything move in slow motion. Lena and I had taken the jet skis out into Clearwater Bay, just trying to escape the stillness of the canal. We weren't racing or pulling tricks or anything, just kind of drifting, talking, letting the salt spray hit our skin while the hum of distant engines filled in the background. That's when he showed up. The boat wasn't anything memorable, medium size, kind of dull white, maybe a bit of rust near the outboard. What stuck out was the guy driving it. He looked like he belonged in a dive bar, not out in the middle of the bay mid-afternoon with a beer in hand, steering one-handed like he'd done it 1,000 times. Older, thick around the middle, tan like leather. He wasn't doing anything aggressive, but he wasn't passing by either. He just sort of appeared near us. Close enough to talk. Too close, really. He said some things, asked about our jet skis, said something about how the bay was his favorite place to unplug. The kind of surface-level chatter that wouldn't raise eyebrows if it were anyone else. But it was the way he looked at us. Not in a flirty way. Not even in a friendly dad kind of way. Just too direct. Like he'd already made up some version of us in his head and was just waiting for us to play into it. It didn't feel right. I didn't say anything at first. Neither of us did. Because honestly, weird encounters happen. People are awkward. But now I keep going back to that exact moment, the way he just drifted up, uninvited, and I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't random, like he already knew what he was doing. The ride back through the canal is usually the part where things start to feel calm again. After the open water, the stillness of the mangroves and the echo of the engine bouncing off the seawalls kind of wraps you back into safety. That day, though, something felt off. Lena was ahead of me by a little, both of us idling slow, just easing back home like we always did. I remember the breeze dying down, the water glassy under the jet skis. That's when I saw it. Same boat, same dull paint, same lazy sway like someone had just cut the engine and let it drift. It was parked, not in front of our house, but close, just sitting at the canal split where ours branches off, like a checkpoint, like he wanted to see which direction we'd go. He wasn't doing anything illegal, wasn't even close enough for us to really accuse him of anything, but he didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even pretend to look busy, just sat there, watching, or maybe not. I don't know, that's the thing, I still don't know. Could have been nothing. Maybe he lived on the side canal, maybe he got lost, maybe he was fishing, but the way he hovered, the way his boat was just angled slightly toward ours like he wanted to follow without following, it twisted something in my gut. I didn't say anything to Lena, not yet. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, that it wasn't even definitely him, but deep down, I knew. Same boat, same feeling. It didn't just happen twice by accident. There was no reason for him to be there, unless he was following us. There's this weird in-between moment after a long ride on the water, when you're still kind of in that sun-soaked haze, but your brain is slowly flipping back into home mode. That's where we were. Lena and I had docked the jet skis and were rinsing them down, water still dripping off the hulls, the spray nozzle hissing into the quiet like background noise. Then, just like that, he showed up again. No announcement, no honking or calling out, just his boat gliding slowly into view, easing up along the edge of our dock like it belonged there. I remember feeling this tight, sudden tension in my chest, like my body registered what was happening before my brain did. He didn't ask to come up, didn't even make an excuse. He just started talking, casual stuff, meaningless stuff, compliments about our backyard setup, about the dog lying near the steps, even about the way the sun hit the water from our spot. All said with this strange calm like we were old friends catching up. But we weren't. He wasn't even a neighbor, as far as I knew, and nothing about it felt casual to me. There's this awful feeling when someone clearly crosses a line, but they do it in a way that makes it hard to push back without seeming rude or dramatic. That's exactly what it felt like. Like we were trapped in this moment where being polite felt safer than calling it what it really was. Lena didn't play that game for long. She always had a sharper edge than me. He eventually turned his boat around, but even that felt slow, deliberate, like he wanted us to watch him go, like he wasn't really leaving, just reminding us that he could come back. It showed up the next morning, right on our front step, neatly placed, not damaged. Nothing unusual about the delivery itself. The guy had the scanner, the badge, the right tone, professional, bored, just doing his route. He barely looked at me when I opened the gate remotely. No reason to be suspicious. Not at first, but the second I saw the package, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't big, just a clear, watertight case, the kind people use for boating or storing electronics on the water, not the kind of thing you order without purpose. Inside, nothing, not a single object. Just a note, handwritten, not in any threatening script or anything messy, just weird. The wording was vague, like someone trying to be clever without actually saying anything. I can still remember the way the ink looked, smudged a little like it had been written in a hurry. No return address, no brand name on the packaging, just our names, both of them. We hadn't ordered anything. I double-checked, so did Lena. No one sent us a gift. It wasn't some mix-up. It was meant to be there. That part hit me the hardest. Whoever sent it knew exactly where to send it. Our full names, our exact address, and it got through the gate like it was nothing. I mean, yeah, this is a gated community, but what does that even mean if someone like him can just reach through it with no problem? I tried to tell myself it could have been anything. A prank, a mistake. But no, it wasn't random. Not with everything else already happening. That package didn't have to say much. It said enough. It was the kind of silence you only notice when it gets broken. Late at night, humid, windows cracked just enough to catch the breeze off the canal. Everything felt still, like the whole neighborhood was asleep under a blanket of heat, and then Ranger lost it. Not his usual bark. Not the excited, someone's here kind. This was something else. A kind of deep, frantic sound that tore through the house like an alarm. The second I heard it, my chest tightened. I shot up in bed, and before I even got to the window, I already felt that something was wrong. Then I saw it. There was movement in the yard. Fast, heavy, a shape cutting across the shadows near the dock. I couldn't make out a face or details, just the outline of a big man moving with a weird kind of urgency, like he wasn't sneaking, just going. And then that splash. Loud. Close. The kind of sound that makes you freeze, even though your brain is screaming move. I did, eventually. Lena was already halfway down the stairs when I caught up with her. We threw every light on, every outdoor flood, checking the doors, scanning the yard. But he was gone. Nothing but ripples where the water met the dock. No boat, no footprints. Just Ranger pacing like he was still ready to tear someone apart. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know how long he'd been out there before Ranger went off. Was he just watching us? Was he trying to come inside? Maybe he was testing something, seeing how far he could go. I keep replaying it in my head, over and over, and every time I come back to that one moment, him disappearing into the water like he was part of it. We told our dad everything. Not that it helped much. He was pissed we didn't get the boat's registration, like that would have solved it all. I get it, he meant well, but even if we had, I don't know if it would have made a difference. We asked the neighbors too. Nobody had backyard cameras facing the canal. No one saw the boat. No one even heard anything. It's like the guy was never really there. No proof, no evidence. Nothing solid to hold up and say, look, this happened. Just a handful of moments, strung together by gut instinct and the kind of fear you only recognize after it's already passed through you. The weirdest part? I can't even say anything really happened. Not technically. No break-in. No harm. The boat never touched our dock again. The guy never came back. But somehow it still doesn't feel over. Every time we're out on the water now, Lena on one jet ski, me on the other, I catch myself looking behind more than ahead, listening for engine noise, scanning every anchored boat, and every time I think I see something that even kind of resembles that boat, my stomach knots up like it's trying to tell me something before my brain catches on. I don't even know what I'd do if I saw him again. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'd freeze. Maybe I wouldn't even be sure it was him. That's the worst part. How much doubt slips in once the adrenaline fades. Was it just some creepy coincidence? A string of harmless moments I stitch together into something bigger. I try to convince myself it's over, but deep down I can't shake the feeling that whatever this was, it didn't really end. It just stopped showing itself. You ever hear a story so many times that it starts to feel like you lived it, even if you weren't there? That's how this one feels to me. It was just another one of those fishing weekends. My dad and my Uncle Ray out on the water doing what they always did. Same ritual every time. Bar Harbor, early morning launch, enough gear to last the night, and then off into the Atlantic like it was nothing. They loved it, lived for it, honestly. Ray had this old two-cabin cruiser called the Marlin Edge. In photos, it looked like a beast, solid, dependable, like something you'd trust to carry you through a storm. But I've stood on that deck, and I'll tell you, out at sea with nothing but miles of water and sky, it didn't feel big at all. More like a floating coin toss. Fishing never really clicked for me. Dad tried to get me into it a few times, but I was the kid who got seasick while the boat was still tied to the dock. Still, I listened to their stories. I know the way they talked about those trips, like sacred ground, just water and silence, and the occasional haul of tuna or striped bass to break it up. That silence, they used to love it. They always went far. Not just out of sight of land, but out of reach. The kind of distance where your phone becomes a paperweight and your only connection to anything human is the voice of the guy standing next to you. I think that's what they liked best. They'd done it dozens of times without a hitch. But this one didn't go like the others, and they never saw it coming. Now here's where things start to slip sideways. It was late, after dinner, after a couple of beers, after the kind of silence that only comes when you're surrounded by water and no shoreline in sight. My dad and Uncle Ray were just killing time in the cabin, playing cards like they always did. Nothing unusual, just the hum of the engine, the soft creak of the hull, the kind of rhythm that makes you forget you're floating above God knows what. And then everything stopped. Lights, gone. Instruments, dead. The soft electric buzz that usually hangs in the air, just disappeared. 1 second, everything was fine. The next it was like someone pulled the plug on the whole world. No flicker, no warning, just nothing. Ray grabbed the flashlight from the wall, but it was old, maybe older than the boat. The beam was more like a suggestion of light, barely lit his fingers, let alone the panel he was trying to inspect. He said later it looked like 2 fuses had blown, but even that didn't make sense. Boats don't just die like that, not everything at once. And outside it was unreal. No moon, no stars, just black, thick and heavy, like something pressing against the windows. Dad said stepping onto the deck felt like floating in ink. He couldn't even tell if his eyes were open. It was that dark. When you're out there and the world just shuts off around you, your mind doesn't stay quiet. It starts whispering. You start remembering every story you ever heard about things going wrong at sea, about boats found adrift with no one left on board, about bad timing, about being in the wrong place. And suddenly the silence doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels personal, like it's watching you. It's the kind of thing that sticks with you even if you didn't hear it yourself. I wasn't there, but I've heard them describe it, separately, together, over drinks, in long silences, and every time it's the same. They heard something that night, not long after the blackout, maybe an hour in. Not the engine, not the hull settling, not the kind of creaks you expect from a boat floating alone in open water. This was different. A low, vibrating sound that didn't quite belong, like a hum but off, or a groan maybe, but not coming from anything they could see. It came from behind the boat, drifting up from the dark like something thinking out loud. Ray and my dad both stepped out to the deck, just to make sure they weren't going crazy, but they weren't. The sound was real, and it was close. They tried shining the flashlight into it, but the rain had started by then, soft at first, just enough to turn the beam into a blur. Everything out there was smeared black. They said it felt like trying to see through oil. The light didn't land on anything, no surface, no shape, just wet nothingness. They stood there, not saying much, waiting for it to shift or move or stop. It didn't. It just sort of hovered, like whatever was making it knew they were listening. Eventually, they went back inside, probably the smartest thing they did all night. Because out there, with the sound still humming low and steady behind them, and the rain tapping harder on the roof, the boat didn't feel like shelter anymore. It felt like a target, and when you're surrounded by ocean and sky and something that refuses to explain itself, you start to wonder if maybe staying inside is just putting off whatever's coming. Out of everything, this is the part that gnaws at me the most. Not the sound, not even the body they found later. This, the emergency locker. The one thing that's supposed to be reliable when everything else fails. After the blackout and that awful noise, Ray went to check it. Not in a panic, just doing what you're taught to do. You lose power. You check your safety gear. Simple protocol. But what he found, it wasn't right. The locker wasn't empty, but it might as well have been. The flares gone. Not one left. The backup flashlight batteries? Missing. And the EP-orb, the emergency beacon that's supposed to send out your location when everything else is shot. It wasn't there. Just a clean rectangle of dust where it should have been sitting. Ray didn't even say anything at first. He just stared at it for a long while, like he was trying to remember if he'd somehow taken it out. But he hadn't. He never did. That thing always stayed in its place. Always. That's when the questions start creeping in, the kind that don't have clean answers. Had it been like that for a while and they just hadn't noticed? Weeks, maybe months? Or was it recent? Had someone been on the boat when they weren't looking? Or worse, while they were looking the other way? And then there's that other possibility. The one I don't even like saying out loud, that it was taken for a reason, that maybe the person who took it didn't want them signaling for help. Ray didn't touch the locker after that, just closed it and walked away like it wasn't real. But I know him. That moment got under his skin, because it wasn't just gear that went missing, it was trust. When the sun finally came up, it didn't bring any comfort with it, just light. Barely. The fog was thick, clinging to the water, curling around the boat like it wanted to stay. My dad said it was the kind of fog that doesn't lift. It just settles, like it's made of something heavier than air. That's when they saw it. Another boat, just sitting there in the haze, maybe a couple 100 feet off the bow. No lights, no sound, no movement, just a shape, almost blending into the fog, like it had been cut out of the morning itself. It didn't make sense. They hadn't heard an engine all night, no passing radio traffic, nothing. And yet here it was, a single vessel floating like it belonged to the silence. They motored closer, slowly, cautiously. I remember my dad saying he kept waiting for someone to appear on deck, to wave, to move, to do something, but the boat stayed still, not adrift, exactly. more like it was anchored in place by something they couldn't see. Ray tied them off, said he'd check it out. Maybe someone was hurt. Maybe their radio was dead too, just like theirs had been. I think about what it must have felt like, stepping off your own boat and onto another that shouldn't be there. The deck underfoot, quiet, no seagulls, no splashing, not even the creak of a rope, just that thick fog, and a silence so deep it made your ears ring. And when Ray reached the cabin door, I wonder what he felt. That kind of stillness doesn't come from peace. It comes from absence, a vacuum, like whatever had happened inside that boat had already been swallowed whole, and he still hadn't opened the door yet. He went down alone. Ray, just one step at a time into that quiet boat still half swallowed by fog. The door to the cabin wasn't even locked, just swung open with a nudge like it had been waiting. He told me later, told all of us, really though never the same way twice, that it wasn't what he saw first, it was what he smelled, said it was thick, like the air itself was rotting, like the boat had lungs and whatever they'd been breathing was now spilling out into the room. He couldn't describe it, not really, just said it smelled wrong, and then, there he was, the man, hanging from a thick rope looped through an overhead beam, feet just above the floor, no motion, no blood, no sign that he'd fought it, just hanging there, quiet like the rest of the boat. Ray didn't go any closer. He said something in the back of his mind told him to turn around before he made eye contact, like looking too long might, I don't know, let something in. He came back up shaking. My dad watched him climb over the rail, and said he didn't even need to ask. Said the look on Ray's face said more than words ever could. And Dad, he never crossed over. Didn't want to, didn't need to. That boat just sat there behind them, while they tried to figure out what the hell to do next. No answers, no clues, just that awful, awful stillness. And I keep thinking, who ties a noose on a boat in the middle of the ocean? Who's out that far with no gear, no backup, no signal? And why did they have to be the ones to find it? Nothing explains any of it, and maybe nothing ever will. They called it in, once the fog started to peel back just enough to get a bearing. The VHF crackled to life like it had never been dead. My dad read off their coordinates with a voice that didn't sound like his own, and the Coast Guard said they'd be there within the hour. That part felt real, tangible, something you could hold on to. But everything else, nothing. No ID on the man, no record of that boat being out there, no missing person report that matched, no answers about the electrical failure, and definitely no explanation for that low, vibrating hum that had filled the night and then vanished like it had never existed. They were given a thank you and sent back to shore, but nobody really followed up, not the way you'd expect, like it was just another weird thing the ocean decided to keep vague. Uncle Ray doesn't talk about it anymore, won't even let anyone mention it around him. I tried once, just a passing comment, and he shut down so fast I felt the air change in the room. Dad's different. He'll talk, but only after a few drinks, and even then, it's more like he's remembering out loud, not telling a story, like he's trying to process it for the 1000th time, and it still doesn't make sense. And me? I wasn't even there, but I think about it more than I probably should. I play it out in my head, the blackout, the sound, the missing gear, that boat, and it never quite lines up. Nothing fits. It just sits there unfinished. I don't know what's worse, not knowing what happened, or realizing maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe some things are better left drifting out there, untied, unanswered, and quiet. You know those summer days that just feel baked into your memory? Not because anything particularly crazy happens, but because the heat alone practically brands it into your skin. Yeah, this was one of those days. Mid-July, the kind of heat that makes everything shimmer a little. The air felt thick before we even left the driveway. Evan had texted earlier that morning, said he was taking the boat out and had room. That was pretty much all it took. Evan was the boat guy in our group, like not just has a boat level. He had the radar set up, sonar, maps on a mounted screen, emergency kits, backup gear, the whole thing. It was a 24-footer center console, white hull with blue trim. I remember because it always looked sharp against the bay, and he was one of those rare people who liked being the responsible one. Barely drank, Loved the water. I think part of him got a kick out of carting us around while we clowned around in the back. We never talked about it directly, but everyone kind of relied on him. None of us really knew how to navigate anything past the basics. I wouldn't even know how to anchor properly, if I'm being honest. We just showed up with coolers and sunscreen and assumed he'd handle the rest. And he always did, like clockwork. It felt routine at this point, like one of those things that's become tradition without anyone actually saying so. A Friday like any other, music loaded, drinks iced. No plans except to drift around Longwater Bay and maybe dock somewhere for food later. Just another day out there, nothing special. Funny how the ones that feel the most normal at first end up being the ones that don't leave you alone. We'd been cruising around Longwater Bay for a few hours by then, just letting the sun work on us. No real destination, just floating, drifting, killing time the way summer practically begs you to. At some point, Evan steered us over towards Seacrest Wharf, this bar/grill where boaters tie up and hang out. You've probably seen places like it. Half the people there look like they haven't worn real clothes in weeks, just salt-washed swimsuits and sandals that somehow never dry. It was crowded, but not in a bad way. The kind of energy that makes everything feel easy. We tied off at the dock, grabbed a table under one of those huge umbrellas, and ordered the usual burgers, fries, fish tacos, something fried and forgettable. I honestly couldn't tell you what I ate. It's just a blur now. I remember the music though. Some old rock playlist the bar had on loop, and the way the salt air mixed with the smell of grilled shrimp and sunscreen. It was one of those late afternoons where everything starts to slow down just enough that you stop checking the time. The light gets softer, people laugh a little easier. We weren't in a rush. Nobody had anything to do or anywhere to be. That kind of stillness that only really happens when you're surrounded by water. But even then, in the middle of that ease, I had this strange little thought in the back of my head, like we were sliding into that quiet part of a movie. The stretch right before something shifts. Not in a big dramatic way, but just changes the tone. Like the day didn't know it yet, but it was already on its way towards something else. Something we weren't ready for. Looking back, I think that was the last moment it all felt completely normal. After we pulled away from Seacrest Wharf, everything kind of settled into that quiet rhythm again. Evan steered us back out into the open water, this time toward a stretch near Beacon's Point. I'd been out that way before, but never really paid attention to the island or the lighthouse sitting on it. It always just existed in the background, a landmark you notice but don't really think about. This time was different. The sun had dipped low by the time we got near it, just brushing the horizon, casting that kind of orange-pink glow that makes everything look a little too perfect. That lighthouse, though, it stopped feeling picturesque and started feeling off. It had this weird presence to it, like it was watching us. I know how that sounds, and I'm not trying to be dramatic, but something about it didn't sit right. Evan killed the engine and let the boat drift. The music kept playing. Everyone was talking and laughing, passing around drinks, but I wasn't really locked in anymore. I just kept glancing back at that tower on the island. There was no light in the lantern room, no movement, nothing, but still, I couldn't shake this sense that it didn't belong in the night, like the daylight forgave it somehow, made it neutral. But in the dark, it turned into something else entirely. It wasn't a full-body dread or anything. Not yet, just that flicker of unease. The kind you can't name but can't ignore either. The conversations around me felt like background noise, almost too loud for where we were, and I couldn't stop thinking about the way that lighthouse just loomed. Looking back, I think that's when my brain first started sending up flares. I just didn't know what for. Not yet. I don't even know what I was looking at. Maybe still the lighthouse, maybe the water, but everything else started to fade out around me. I had this tight, quiet feeling in my chest that I couldn't place, and that's when I heard it. Just a sound, barely. Like a cry, maybe? I wasn't sure. It could have been a bird or wind or something echoing off the rocks. It was so faint I almost let it go, but I didn't. I kept listening. Everyone else was still talking, passing around drinks, shouting over the music. It felt like I was the only one slowing down. I scanned the horizon, squinting toward the darker parts of the island and the water around it. Then it came again. Not loud, but sharper. Not just noise this time. Words. Real words. Someone was saying something. I couldn't make it out all the way, but it sounded like a call, like someone trying to get attention. For a second, I thought maybe someone was playing around, someone on another boat, or back on land. But we weren't that close to anything. There weren't other boats nearby, not that I could see. And the voice, it sounded wrong, like it didn't belong out there. Not in the dark. Not with the music still low in the background. Not with us just floating out there. Like everything was fine. I didn't say anything right away. I kept waiting for someone else to react. Maybe one of the others heard it too and would crack a joke about it, or say I was imagining things. But no one did. I just sat there, trying to decide if I was going to say something and hoping, really hoping, that someone else would hear it and say it first. Because deep down, I already knew I wasn't imagining it. We headed toward the island. Not fast, but with a kind of quiet urgency, like nobody wanted to say out loud that something was wrong yet. Evan brought us in close enough to drop anchor just off the shore. I think the place was called Drake's Key, though I'm not even sure anymore. It looked small from the water, just a clump of trees and sand with a few rocks jutting out around the edges. Definitely not the kind of place you'd expect to find someone stranded on. We all grabbed our flashlights and climbed off the boat. The sand felt cold underfoot, even after the heat of the day. For a second, it felt stupid. 6 people stomping around this little island like we were part of some amateur search party. I mean, what were we even doing? None of us had any idea how to handle something like this. We were just reacting. But then the ridiculousness faded. Fast. The more we looked, the quieter it got. No voice, no movement, not even rustling in the brush. Just the sound of our own footsteps and the water lapping around the shore. We split up without really saying anything, calling out into the dark, shining our lights into thickets and between trees. And still, nothing. The weirdest part was how small the island really was. It didn't feel like there was anywhere to hide, let alone disappear. If someone had been yelling just minutes before, they had to still be here. That's what I kept telling myself. That's what made it worse. Because it should have been easy, but it wasn't. I kept thinking we'd find a shoe, a bag, anything. But there was just nothing. And the longer we searched, the more it felt like this place was empty in a way that didn't make sense. I wasn't even looking for anything specific. Just scanning the ground, half-focused, flashlight sweeping over roots and sand and dead leaves. My feet were starting to ache from the uneven terrain, and honestly, my mind was drifting in every direction at once. That's probably why I almost missed it. It was tucked near a patch of dried-out grass, not far from where the sand started to give way to the tree line. I don't know why I looked down at that exact moment, but I did, and there it was. A phone. Half buried, the screen spider-webbed with cracks, still damp, like it had just recently been dropped, or maybe even thrown. I hesitated for a second before picking it up. It felt wrong, like touching something I wasn't supposed to, but I pressed the power button anyway, and somehow the screen lit up, just for a moment. The battery icon was barely holding on, flashing red. But in that flash, I saw enough. There were missed calls, 3 or 4 maybe. The top one just said Mom, and then there was a text preview. I don't remember all of it, but the part that stuck with me said still here. That was it. 2 words, but it hit me harder than I expected. It made it all real in a way nothing else had. This wasn't just someone yelling from the trees or some prank we'd been pulled into. Someone was here, and they were scared, or trying to be found, or trying to get away from something. I stood there with the phone in my hand, the glow already fading, and I couldn't stop wondering, were they waiting for help, or was this the last thing they managed to do before whatever happened next? It felt like the only piece of truth we had, and it wasn't enough. It came out of nowhere. 1 second we were scattered across the island, still looking, still hoping maybe we'd hear something again, and then it hit. This scream, not drawn out, not theatrical, just one sharp, guttural burst that cut straight through the trees from the far side of the island. It didn't even sound human for a second. More like panic boiled down into a single sound. Then silence. I didn't think. None of us did. We just ran. The brush tore at my legs, branches slapping at my arms, but I didn't feel any of it. I don't even remember moving. Just the adrenaline, Just that noise stuck in my head, that scream. It sounded so close, so final. By the time I made it through to the other side, I could already hear the motor. Not loud, distant, fading fast, but unmistakable. And out on the water, just barely visible in the moonlight, was the aftermath. A long, fresh wake cutting through the stillness. No boat in sight. No lights. Nothing to follow. I kept waiting for someone else to say it. That they saw something, or someone, or at least a shape moving in the dark. But no one did. Just that trail across the water, leading to nowhere. We called it in. Explained everything. Bay Patrol showed up, took notes, nodded a lot, but nothing came of it. No reports, no news stories, no missing persons. Just nothing. We ended up back at Evan's place, sitting in his backyard, still in wet clothes, replaying it over and over. Everyone had their own theory. I didn't say much. Still don't. Because the truth is, I don't know what we saw, or who we didn't find, or if we were ever supposed to. And that's the part that keeps me up.